a lot of times people think about, police officers, gunfights, shooting people all the time. 45 years, never had to shoot anybody.
No, been close.
Could have.
I could have easily shot that guy. I didn't come on the job to kill people. I came on the job to help people. And if I could even help him change his ways, then that's what I was there to do.
Hi, my name is Rick Wall. I'm retired from the Los Angeles Police Department, and this is part of our Law Enforcement Oral History Project. The purpose of these interviews and what we do is to capture the stories of our friends and colleagues, people who've done just some amazing things in their careers, and we never hear about them, or we do hear about them. And tragically, at a memorial service, we sit there and say, hey, he had some great stories, or she did some amazing things. And, somebody should have written those down or gotten those stories, and we didn't. And there's really no excuse for that, especially in this digital age. So why we're here today is to work on those stories, get those stories from those people who lived them, so we can have those and memorialize them. They can pass them down to their families, and it's a win-win. So with that, I want to welcome our interview today it's going to be with Nick Barbara. Nick is a dear friend. He did 45 years with the Los Angeles Police Department. At the time you retired, you were number one in seniority and had been so for
about 5 years.
For several years. Yeah. So where's Nick Barbara come from? And tell us a little about how did LAPD happen?
I'll tell you, actually, it's really interesting. When I was 9 years old, I wanted to be one of two things. I wanted to be an airline pilot or a jet fighter pilot first. And the other thought was I'd rather be a Los Angeles, not just a policeman. I wanted to be a Los Angeles policeman. And was when I was 9 years old. And I'm real fortunate because I ended up growing up and being fortunate enough to apply to LAPD, get hired, and go through the academy. And that was the beginning of it all.
And lived your dream.
Yes, it was. And I say it because I say to people, I don't know many people who can say they've had a childhood dream they got to live for 45 years.
Yeah. So when'd you come on the academy?
I started the academy March 24th of 1968, which was a long time ago now. And I graduated August 9th of 1968.
Okay.
And it was, it was different back then. It was actually different than from the time you went through. It was a 5-month academy, but it was in a month, out a month, in a month. You guys went through that too, right?
We were just 4 months.
Okay. So we did 5 months, in a month, out a month, in a month, out a month, in a month, then graduated. And in the first month out, you were given certain different assignments. And a lot of it was more to understand the perfunctory stuff for the department. Like we had to go to R&I for 4 days. And
R&I's records and identifications.
Yes. And we had to try and understand what their function was and why it applied to us. And then we had to do parking and intersection control for 4 days. Then we had to work a jail for 4 days. Then we had to work a traffic car for 2 weeks. So, it was really interesting because it was like on-the-job training of things you're going to come in contact with. And then we'd go back to the academy for a month, and you go out. The next time we went out for a month, we went out to patrol for an entire month. Then we came back to the academy and brushed up on all the things, and graduation day.
And you graduated what day?
August 9th, 1968. And just before that, obviously, I think it was like when we came back for that 5th month, they told us, we'd actually applied for where we wanted to go. We were all asked to give us 3 divisions we'd like to work or assigned to. So I put down 77th, Southwest and Harbor. And I ended up getting Harbor Division. So I went to Harbor Division for my first, I graduated August 9th, which was a Friday. And then I was assigned to Harbor Division, and I was told I was going to morning watch or graveyards or AMs, whatever. Now I think they call it watch 3. But so I went to morning watch, but morning watch then started at 12:15 in the morning, which means we didn't hit the street till 1 in the morning. But if you're working Sunday morning, you had to go in Saturday night to go to roll call. So it was really pretty interesting. And so my first night, I didn't have a locker or anything. So I get to the station, I'm in full uniform, carrying all my extra stuff that I don't know where I'm going to put it yet. So I go in there, and fortunately, the guy let me in the back door. He saw me in uniform, so he didn't have a problem letting me in the station. I went in the station, down the hallway, went in the watch commander's office, and the watch commander was on the phone. And there was an old sergeant, kind of a portly sergeant guy, and I ended up knowing his son came on the department, and I knew him too. But his name, and he, so what are you doing here, kid? And I just introduced myself. I said I just graduated yesterday from the academy. My name's Nick Barber, and I'm supposed to work morning watch. And he goes, okay. And I looked over, and the lieutenant was on the phone. So he says, hold on a second, kid. Turns around, opens up this cabinet hanging on the wall, takes out a lever action 30-30 rifle, like a John Wayne rifle, hands it to me, and he says, and here's a box of ammunition, here's a handheld radio. He says, get your helmet, put the black cover on it. You're going to be the roof detail, go on the roof, and if anything comes towards the station that doesn't look right, shoot it. And I did one of those, like, is that my discretion, or is there some parameters I have to go by? Because that's all he said. If you see something coming towards the station that doesn't look right, shoot it. So it left me kind of stunned on that. So I said, okay. So I'm standing there, and he looks at me and goes, well, go up to the roof. I said, sir, how do I get there? This is like my first time in here. I don't know how to get to the roof. He goes, go down the hall, go to the stairs, go all the way down to the end of the hall. There's double doors, go out there, and then you're on the roof. I said, okay. So I went up there, and I had my helmet with the black cover on it, because all our general duty helmets were all white. So I go up there, and I'm up there about an hour and a half, and then I hear roof detail. Oh, that's me. I pick up the handheld radio, and I go, yes. And they go, we got somebody coming up to relieve you. I said, okay. So about a minute later, two guys come walking through the double doors. One guy's wearing a suit, and the guy's wearing a pair of slacks, shirt, and tie. And they were both older guys. I figured they must be detectives or something. So they came in, and they said, hey, kid, you got to go down to the watch commander's office. We're relieving you. I said, oh, okay. But when they're talking to me, they're doing like one of these and like looking around me, and it kind of made me nervous, because I thought, am I missing something back here? So I turned around to look. I didn't see anything, and I said, is there something wrong? Because I see you're looking. And he goes, where's our chairs? You don't think we're going to stand up here all night, do you? So I had to go find some chairs and bring them chairs to sit on. And then I went down to the watch commander's office, and the lieutenant says, hey, son, he says, do you bring extra ammo to work and you do all that stuff? You brought all that stuff you're supposed to bring? I said, yes, sir. And he goes, okay, get all your ammo, put it all in your pocket. The box of ammo? He goes, yeah, put the whole box of ammo in your pocket. He goes, there's a riot going on, son, and you're going to it. That was my first night. It was the third anniversary of the 65 Watts riot, and there was an anniversary riot, which happened in 68. So I spent my first 6 days on the job at the riot.
Welcome to the Los Angeles Police Department.
Yeah, it was, I was like in shock. And he goes, if you have anybody, the lieutenant goes, if you have anybody that loves you and you want to let them know, call them, tell them, but you don't know when you're getting home.
How long did you stay at Harbor?
About a year and 4 months.
Okay. Anything memorable pop up other than a riot your first night for your first week?
Oh yeah, there was a few other things. Some things that were kind of different for me, because my training officer had 25 years on the job, and he came on when I was born, and he was a big guy. He was about 6'2", weighed about 260 pounds, so he had a big belly, but he was really a nice guy, but he was a very old school cop. Then we had a couple instances we went to that when we got back to the car, he gave me a what for. A real serious discussion on how we do business, and this is how we do it, kid.
You mentioned once before that you had a stabbing call on one of your first nights out.
Yeah, that was...
And that kind of stuck with you.
It did, because what happened to me was I was working with a guy named Warner Cole, who's now deceased. He passed away. But Warner Cole was really a nice guy, and I was working with him, and it happened at 7th and Gaffey in San Pedro. So we roll up there, and they said, the ambulance already took him up to San Pedro Hospital. So we went up there, And I didn't realize how sensitive I was going to be to that. But I went in there, and I was in where the surgery, and the doctor's probing with a probe in his chest. And I got really, real, I thought I was going to pass out or throw up. I'd never seen anything like that. So it was kind of a shock for me. And so my partner was nice. He goes, go sit in the car and, open the door and catch a little air and you'll be all right. So that's what really it hit me hard, because I'd never seen anything like that. And it was kind of a shock.
Now, for context, for people who aren't familiar, this is 1968, 69.
Yeah.
Paramedics didn't exist.
Correct.
Because paramedics didn't come about till the mid 70s.
Actual paramedics, yeah. And we had, the earliest I remember, we had things called G units, and they were kind of a copper-colored ambulance, but they were city employees, and they ran strictly out of Central Receiving Hospital, which also is no longer there. But they handled the entire city. And there was Central Receiving had some, and Hollywood, there was a real small clinic receiving hospital at Hollywood, next to Hollywood Station. There was one station there. There was one, I think, stationed in Central Division. And they had a couple out in the valley, but it wasn't like a paramedic ambulance like we know today.
Then the Black Panther shootout.
I was working Harbor when that happened in December of
69.
Yeah, and I remember that because one of the sergeants working Harbor, he was one of the original SWAT guys before there was a real SWAT organization. And I remember I was in the station when that all was going down, and I was at the desk, and someone called and said, "Hey, Sergeant," I think his name was Williams, was shot and killed at that Panther shootout. And everybody was like, "What?" But it turned out he wasn't. He had been shot, but he didn't die. So, but it was a pretty ugly. Happened at 41st and Central, and it was quite an ordeal. I mean, it was a big deal. I didn't go to it. I didn't get to go to it. But a couple months later, I transferred to traffic. I went to traffic, and I went to traffic based on a sergeant telling me, "Hey, kid, when you leave here, you're going to go to communications, jail, or something else you may not like parking and intersection control." He says, "Why don't you consider going to traffic?" He says, "Because somewhere in your career, that's going to add a benefit for you." So I did. I transferred to traffic, and traffic was actually a good thing, but it was like seeing a whole lot more stuff I had never seen before in my life. Traffic was really an interesting job. As a matter of fact, on February 1st of 1970, my partner and I were at 41st and Central. We were eastbound on 41st Street, and we sat back from the intersection because intersection was signal controlled, and we said, our job is writing tickets. We'll see if we can catch a ticket. Maybe somebody's going to blow the light, and we'll write a ticket. So we're sitting there, and I see this car I could see through the glass on the building on the north side of the street, and I saw this Lincoln Continental, the old barge, those suicide doors and stuff, and this guy was flying southbound. And I see him coming, and as I look, I see this other car going to make a left turn on the 41st Street. Two little blue-haired old ladies it was a Sunday morning, they were going to church, and they made a left turn in front of that Lincoln, and I said, "Hey, partner, we're going to witness a traffic accident." And we were traffic, so guess who's going to handle it? As soon as he hit her, she hit the gas, and I looked back, and I see she's coming towards us. So I tried to look back, see if I could back up. Next thing I know, I turned back forward to move, and I just watched the hood crumple and fall to the windshield. And then she bounced off us and went into a taco stand on the corner. And that actually ended up being a help call because my partner put out, we've been involved in a collision, and we need ambulance, 2 ambulances. And then we jumped out of the car to go up check on these 2 old ladies in the RTO, which is the radio telephone operators. They call them PSRs. But she tried to raise us on the air, and she didn't, so she put a help call out. And we were right around the corner from where the Panther shootout occurred. And in all honesty, and like that quick, there was 200-300 people out there after us saying we were the bad guys. We hit these old ladies. So that was an interesting part of my first trip into traffic.
So you had a couple good investigations working in traffic, and then then coming to the 70s, things started making changes.
Yes. I remember the 70s because I was still working traffic at the time, and the Jacobs Company I think they were out of Chicago, I don't remember exactly, but I think they were out of Chicago, and they were hired to come into LAPD and to do a whole survey and examination of the Los Angeles Police Department to say, hey, what is everybody's job? What do they do? And ultimately what they set up was they brought money. It brought money to us because they made different levels of police officers, 1s, 2s, 3s, 3s plus whatevers for bonuses for different assignments, but basic 1, 2, and 3 police officers. And then they made detectives 1 and 2s. They made lieutenants 1 and 2s. They made 3 levels of captains. And the higher ups, they didn't change much. They left it pretty much static. But it brought money because each one of those different levels of rank brought more money to an officer. So it was a big change. And that was actually a huge thing because back then we had to take a written exam and then an oral interview like regular promotions just for the P3 positions. And I ended up in the excellent pool, and I was working traffic. And then, so I heard 30 guys in traffic got into the outstanding pool. It was outstanding, excellent, satisfactory, and non-sat.
And thanks for showing up.
Yes. It's too bad you came because you didn't do well. And so I heard these 30 guys. So I went to the captain and says, hey, am I going to have a chance here to get a P3 position? And he goes, no, I've got 30 officers here, and they're going to get all the spots.
Now, again, just for clarification, if you're in the excellent pool, you cannot get a position over someone in the outstanding pool. If someone in the outstanding pool applies,
I'm out.
You're out.
Yes. In other words, it was just, that's the way it was, and I was disappointed. I would like to have been in the outstanding pool, but I wasn't. So I said, well, okay. And Bob Vernon was a lieutenant at traffic when I was there, and he made captain and went to Venice. And he liked the work I did. He complimented me on what a good job I did. And he says, hey, if you ever need anything, give me a call. So after the captain at traffic said, no, you're not getting a job. Well, now it's hunt time. Go find a P3 spot somewhere. So I called Venice, and his adjutant answered the phone. I knew the adjutant too. And I said, hey, I want to apply for your P3 position, which was really unusual. And he goes, okay. He said, let me take a look here. He goes, tomorrow morning, 11:30. Oh, okay. He goes, be here a little before 11:30 and the captain will interview you. I said, okay. So I said, well, that's good. At least I got a chance. I got an interview. About 2 hours later, he calls me back. He says, you don't have to come in tomorrow morning at 11:30. And I thought, okay, I'm out. That's something happened. He goes, captain said, do you want to work an A car or an X car? But you got the spot. So I went back to traffic, and I told the captain that I was going to be leaving. And he goes, no, you're not. And he blocked me for 3 months from going because all the guys he thought were going to take P3 spots, they went metro, they went all over the place and got P3 spots and left traffic. And so he said, I'm not going to let you go because you're one of my experienced traffic guys, and I can't afford to let you go, and I'm not going to let you go. And that was a little stick, but it hurt.
And the senior guys, the experienced guys, the ones you need for the fatals.
That's right. Matter of fact, I worked traffic for 13 months, and in 13 months I handled 13 fatal traffics, which is very unusual that one guy would handle that many fatals, because my partner, he'd been there 3 years and handled 3 fatals. And so I actually had a guy I worked with one morning. He goes, I don't want to work with you. I go, why is that? He goes, because you caused death all over the place.
Okay, so after your P3 spot, what happened next?
Well, I was there for a couple months. Vernon called me in and said, hey, I really appreciate what you're doing. There's some things I'd like you to do. I said, okay. So I was assigned a foot beat to walk Venice Beach in full uniform, long sleeve shirts, wool, hat, the whole thing. And we did that he prepped it for to hit the summer months where it was going to be really busy. And so being the P3, he gave me 5 officers, P2s and a P1, and we walked a footbeat on Venice Beach on the boardwalk itself. And we actually did a very good job. In 6 weeks, we booked 284 people.
Wow.
So, and the first 3 days, because I was in charge, I told my guys, here's what I want to do. We're going to start at Rose and we're going to work south, and we'll probably go down right to about where Muscle Beach is, kind of thing, because everything south of that's pretty much local and not as busy as the northern end. I said, we're going to go just walk and talk. Tell people we're here and here's what we're doing. And if you're coming here to have a good time and enjoy the beach, then great. If you come here to cause problems, you're going to deal with us. And that's kind of what we did for 3 days. But like I said, we ended up booking 284 people in 6 weeks. I actually grabbed a gun out of a guy's hand that was in my face. Closer than you and I are right now.
Yeah.
That was pretty amazing. I was working Venice. It was shortly after I got to Venice. I had, Lynn Stermoli. Lynn was my probationer. And he had 7 days out of the academy when this happened. And so as you would look at, as a policeman, I considered myself to be a hunter. I went out every day looking for bad people to put in jail that needed to go to jail. So I would take copious notes at roll call and stuff. And so this day, roll call, they were talking about all this stuff, and I'm going out, I'm trying to hunt all day long, and I'm not finding anything. I mean, I'm turning over rocks, I'm shaking bushes, and I'm just not coming up with anything. And I'm looking at Lynn, and I'm going, oh my gosh, how am I going to teach this guy what to do? So I said, hey, you know what? Because I didn't like not going to work and not putting somebody in jail that needed to go. So I said, hey, they read out this guy at 14 Brooks who had a warrant. We'll swing by there, and if he's there, we'll hook him and take him to the station, book him, and then we'll go home. He goes, okay. So we go there, and it's at Speedway in Brooks. Pull into the parking lot, and that was back in the day before handheld radios or anything. So I told Lynn, hang the mic out the window. Now I want you to stay down here by the car. And it was a second floor, and it was the exterior corridors. So the stairwell went up, and then the exterior corridor, because it was a former motel, they converted to studio apartments. So I went up the stairs, and I was walking, and Lynn was standing down by the right front fender of the car and the mic. And as I'm walking down, I looked through this one window, and I look, and I could see that the sun was behind me. The screen was filthy, so I could only make out silhouettes. And I could see there were several people in this, it looked like in another room. I could see a doorway, and then in there were some other people. So I said, oh, okay. So then I stepped over about this far was another window, and I looked in that, and then the door was just past that window. And I looked, and I could see there were some more people in the back, but there was 2 people, that silhouettes that were closer. Turned out to be the kitchenette, ultimately. And as I'm reaching to knock on the door, I'm looking in the window, and I hear somebody yell, it's the police, as I'm knocking on the door saying police. And these 2 silhouettes take off, and they start running. So as they run, I go, oh, let me go back to this other window I just looked through, because it looks like it might be connected. So I stepped back. And as the one guy came around the corner, and I saw him swinging and going like this. And my mind went, the toilet's got to be right under the window. This is probably the bathroom, and he's going to throw some dope. So as he comes around and going to throw dope, I'm unsnapping my gun, I'm pulling my gun, and I'm bringing my gun up, and I go freeze. And I pull the screen off, and he's got a .22 revolver, and it's stuck right in my face. And I pulled the screen off, dropped the screen, grabbed the gun around the cylinder, because I knew if I could grab the cylinder, it's not going to fire. And his eyes got bigger than saucers. I said, let it go or I'm going to kill you. And he let it go. So I said, and I told Lynn, get your gun out and get up here. And he's taking stairs, 3 at a time running. And he runs up there and he kicks the door just as some guy's trying to run out, knocks that guy out. And he runs in there. And Lynn, his voice went up to girl level, if you know what I mean.
Went up a couple octaves.
Yeah, he sounded just like a girl screaming, And I said, "Get your hands up! I'm gonna." And I said, I come in and I said, hey, go down the car, put out an assistance call, and then get back up here. And I had about, I think, 8 people, and I told them all, stand up, put your hands up against the wall, put them up real high where I can look at all of you. And the way the room was, there was a table like this at the far end of the room it was a kitchenette that I thought it was. And then the other end of the room, there was a bed, and it had the headboard. Remember those headboards you could lift up and you could, like a bookshelf?
Yeah.
Well, it had like a bookshelf. And so had these guys all stand up while Lynn's going down to the car. And I was close enough that I couldn't see everybody at once, so I had to scan them. So when I'm looking this way and I come back, the guy at the far end, he's looking over at me and he's dropping his hand down towards his headboard. And I said, hey, man, put your hand back up on the wall. And then you put it back up there, and then I look at the others because I want to keep watching them all. I look back and his hand's dropping again. I say, hey, I'll put it up there with a bullet if I have to. I'll pin your hand to the wall. Don't drop your hand again. There was a gun in that headboard. So we ended up getting 2 guns and a bunch of dope and 7 bodies or 8 bodies.
And a wanted suspect.
Yes.
Good caper.
It was actually pretty cool. I mean, it was the closest I'd ever been because he was pulling the trigger. I could feel the cylinder trying to turn.
Wow. So just on that topic, though, a lot of times people think about, police officers, gunfights, we shooting people all the time. 45 years, never had to shoot anybody.
No. Been close.
Could have. I could have easily shot that guy. But, I'll tell you, it told me the difference. When I saw his eyes and his reaction to me telling him I was going to kill him, I knew I'd won. Yeah.
And I didn't come on the job to kill people. I came on the job to help people. And if I could even help him change his ways, then that's what I was there to do. So I meant to share that story because it was really meaningful to me.
I'm glad you did. It's a great story. Made 3+1.
And after that, Vernon's called me in and says, hey, you did a really great job. He says, you're going to be my next 3+1. I'm going to promote you to 3+1. And I got promoted to the Oakwood car, which was a kind of the busier part of the division.
For people who aren't familiar with LAPD, a 3+1 is a bonus position. And
yes.
What's the role of a 3+1?
A senior lead officer is what the title was, and what my role was that I was responsible for 1/6 of Venice Division as a 3+1, and so my area I had 8 officers plus me on a car. That's for the 3 watches, and my job was to make sure that I had the right guys in the right places, and that my job was to take care and look at the crime that was going on in all those different places and brief my people, let them know what's going on. And then I also worked as a training officer at the same time. And then about another couple months later, Vernon called me and said, hey, listen, I'm going to be making some changes. I said, oh, okay. He says, you're going to be my 3+1 on the team policing project, which I was the 3+1 on the initial 1-year try at team policing just to see how it would work. So that was actually fun. It was a good deal. We did 37,000 home inspections in that year for burglary prevention and stuff like that.
Okay, cool. Then what was next on your hit parade?
I was there in Venice for about a little over 3 years, and then I actually had a friend of mine. You may know him. He's now deceased too, Nick Salikos, who ultimately became a captain. And Nick was my friend and partner for a long time. And he said, hey, he went down to Management Services Division. He says, you should come down there. It probably would help you get promoted and stuff. And I go, nah, I'm a cop. I'm a street cop. I don't want to. What do you do there? He goes, oh, we write directives for the chief of police. That doesn't sound like fun to me. That doesn't sound like a neat job. So I said, well, let me see. And at that time, to go to Management Services Division, we had to take an English test. And I got a 98 over a 99 on the test. And they were a little disappointed that I had a 98 over a 99 because they liked the 99s over 99s. It was that competitive. So then I ended up going there, and I spent, I think I was there for 22 months. I made detective out of there. Well, back then it was called investigator. I made investigator. I was an investigator for almost, I didn't finish my full 6 months because I made sergeant 5 months later, and I went to 77th as a brand new sergeant.
So what year was that you made sergeant?
I made sergeant August 1st, 1976.
Now, I'm going to raise this up because I know it's a source of pride for you. Were you ever a police officer?
No.
Go ahead. I know. I know you love this. This is one of your things.
I was never a police officer. I was a policeman. My badge said policeman on it. It didn't say police officer. And at the time, there was policemen and policewomen. The badges said policewoman on it, and ours said policeman. And it was really weird. It wasn't until unisex actually entered the department that they changed the terminology from policeman to police officer.
73.
Right. Which was really, it was kind of a fun thing for me because I said I was never a police officer. I was always a policeman.
And then 73 comes around, and women went through the academy, and women were actually working patrol.
Yeah, ultimately, yeah.
How was that received by the policemen?
Not well at all. I mean, and I think in that era, I think men felt like more like police work is a man's job, work in the street at least. Because before that, there were police women, but there were some that worked detectives, like juvenile and juvenile stuff and sex crimes. And then there were police women that worked the desk, when I worked Harbor, there was police women that handled the jail too, because we had a female jail in Harbor. So, but when the whole unisex thing came in, it was a little difficult. It was a big pill for people to swallow because it was like, and guys are macho, and it was almost a macho thing, hey, because I remember choking a guy out in a booking cage because he called the policewoman who was typing the booking slip for me, he called her a sow. So I put him to sleep.
Times have changed.
Yes. And it was okay.
Yeah.
It was authorized, by the way.
So you make sergeant.
Yes.
Go to 77th?
Yes, sir.
How'd that go?
It was great. It was a great place to work. I was on Team 2, and that was when team policing was big in the department, and I was on Team 2, and being a sergeant was actually a great job. It was a good opportunity to be out there. I had to ride for a week with another sergeant who was a senior sergeant to me, and I was glad the week was over. I just didn't see my role the way he looked at it. And my job was to be a supervisor and to be involved, to make sure the officers are doing their job, doing it right. So we'd go to calls. When I was riding with him that week, I'd get out and put my hat on, because back in those days, you leave the car, your hat goes on. Every time you get out of the car, you put your hat on. Make a traffic stop, put your hat on. Just the way it was. And so I get out and I put my hat on, and he'd go, "What are you putting your hat on for?" I said, "Because I'm supposed to." So he didn't like that. And we kind of butted heads on that a few times. But my thing was, how do I tell an officer to wear his hat if I'm not wearing mine?
Right. Makes sense. So that was 76 you made, then 79 you made another move.
I loved 77th, and I had applied for a Sergeant 2 job over at Pacific, which used to be Venice Division. And I applied for a Sergeant 2 job. I didn't get it. And but the captain at Pacific wanted to bring me from 77th and pull me over to Pacific as a Sergeant 1. And I was in the dilemma because I had a couple other things going. So Mark Croker, who had just made commander, he and I were good friends. I called him up and I said, "Hey, if you got a minute, I'd like to chat with you about some things, maybe pick your brain and find out what you think." And he goes, "Sure." So I told him the dilemma I was feeling, and he goes, "Oh, I can fix that for you." okay. And he said, come down and be my aide. So I transferred down to Technical Services Bureau to be Commander Kruger's aide. That was really a good job. And Chief Lanzarone was a great chief to be working for,
And
too.
what was Technical Services Bureau at the time?
We handled all the perfunctory stuff like motor transport and jails and property and, more of the, it was kind of not an exciting police job, if you know what I mean, but it was the things that, well, actually it did turn out to be good because I was the reason we got light bars. I wrote the whole project to get light bars for the police department. And when I did that project, I used a traffic collision I had gone to that one of the officers when I was working 77th was involved in, and it was a fatal traffic. None of the officers were killed. One of the passengers in the car that hit them was killed. And what was really interesting about that is there was a big lawsuit that came behind it as a result. And in the lawsuit, I found out what happened. And when I found out the lawsuit, the city had settled it out of the court for $75,000 for that fatal. And so when I was doing the project for the light bars, I found out, I looked at that court case, and the judge had already written his decision for that case. He'd heard enough that he wrote a decision, and he was going to grant the family, you ready? $4 million.
In 1978.
Yes.
That's real money.
Yeah. And so when I put the whole project together, I presented it to the CAO, the city administrative officer, was Erwin Piper at the time. And he said, we're not going to spend $2 million for light bars because light bars were $1,000 a piece. We had 2,200 black and white, so it's a little over $2 million for the light bars. And he goes, we're not doing that. I said, well, sir, I'd like to point something out to you that maybe will change your mind. He goes, I don't need you to try and change my mind. I'm in charge of the money, and I'll tell you how it works. I said, well, sir, if you just give me a moment, I'd just like to explain something to you so maybe you'll understand why I'm saying we need them. And he goes, well, take your shot. I'll listen to you, but I control the money. I said, okay. So I showed him the case and showed him how the judge was going to grant $4 million. I said, that traffic collision would have cost you $4 million if you let the judge make the decision. Because in his decision, he said the reason he was awarding the money, he says, although the Los Angeles Police Department was twice above the law of the state of California, because it only requires one single red light facing forward, we had two. So he said, although they were within the law and they were legally and rightfully okay, he said, I think the state of the art, because other agencies were using light bars, he goes, I think the state of the art should prevail over what their standard is, even though they're above the law in it. He said, I think the prevailing circumstance should be overwhelming. So we ended up getting light bars.
There you go. Because before we used to call them mouse ears.
Yes.
Because you had the two cans.
We called them tomato soup cans.
Yeah, had red lights in the front and flashing ambers on the back.
Well, the flashing ambers it was really interesting because that was a switch too, because when I first came on, there was only one way. You turn on the red, you got the flashing ambers. And then a few years they instituted a change, and you could, all the way up was reds and ambers. Then you go past the middle point down and you would just have ambers. So after it stopped, you could just flip it so just the ambers one. So which was, we thought was pretty high tech, and now we got both ways to go. But it was really interesting to look at it from that perspective. It was a big change for us too.
So after your stint as a commander's aide,
I transferred to the academy, and I got a Sergeant 2 job at the academy, and I spent, I think, 22 months at the academy, and then I went to West LA Vice. The academy was great. Matter of fact, that's where you and I met.
Well, that's where we met. You were my sergeant.
It's been a great ride, and you've been a great friend, and I really appreciate the opportunity. We've been together for a long time, and we've worked together in multiple situations. So the academy was fun. I met a lot of neat people and got to know a lot of people, and I got to work with them once I left the academy. I went to West LA. I went to Vice at West LA, and I spent 18 months working Vice. Then I went back to patrol, and I stayed in patrol for a long time in West LA.
How long's a long time, Nick?
19 years.
That's a career for some people.
Yes, it is. It is. And I was there 19 years, but periodically I had a SPU unit, then they disbanded
Special
Problems Unit. Then they disbanded it because of personnel and lack of deployment and whatever else. And then when Connie Dial made captain, she came there and she called me and says, I want to start another SPU unit and you're going to start it. I said, okay, I'll do that, but I need to ask you something. She goes, what's that? And I said, are you going to give me a box of donuts or do I get to pick my own donuts? She goes, what are you trying to say? I said, well, if you're just going to hand me a box of donuts and I don't have a choice, I probably don't really want to do it. I said, I'd like to pick my own people. She goes, well, I'll tell you what we'll do. You pick the donuts, and the ones I don't like, I'll tell you I don't want those. You go find 2 others, or 1 other, or whatever the case might be. I said, okay, that's fair. So I gave her 6 names, and 2 of them, she said, no. I said, I want those 2, and here's why. And she allowed me to keep them.
19 years.
Yeah.
And then you made lieutenant.
Yes.
Not easily, though.
No.
Or let me rephrase it. Not as easily as it should have been.
Yes.
In theory.
Yes.
Tell us about, where'd you come out on the list?
I came out number 1 on the lieutenant's list. I think there was 1,200 people that took it when we took that test. And it was the first time, actually, that they had done outside oral interviews from staff people from other agencies all around, which I thought was really interesting. And it was done at the convention center. But I ended up coming out number 1. And I know you came out number 2. It was great because I found out the day the list came out because you left a message on my home phone telling me and congratulating me. That was really neat. And but it was a almost bittersweet for a little bit. I got promoted on August 10th of 2001. And on October 12th, I got a phone call. I was off duty. I had a teaching job at a community college. So I was just leaving community college, and I got a phone call from commander who told me that my promotion had been canceled. My transfer had been canceled. I was going back to West LA as a Sergeant 1. And he said, if you have any questions, you want to talk to somebody, here's Chief Kalish. He said, give him my number, and he can call me, and I'll be more than happy to talk to him. So I did. As soon as I got off the phone with the commander, I called Chief Kalish, and the first words he said to me was, Nick, this is no way people should be treated, especially people like you in law enforcement. He said, but my hands are tied, and I'm at a point there's nothing I can do about it. And I later found out that he, Mike Bostic, Chief Bostic, and Chief LaChasse, who later became the Burbank chief, Chief Parks was out of town, and so they looked at everything, and I had some complaints pending, but they were all minor complaints, and they agreed that the complaints weren't enough to nullify my promotion, so they promoted me. And then when Parks came back, I don't want to mention names, but
no, I got you. Somebody else
said something to Chief Parks, and they pulled my promotion. And I spent 10 months
in purgatory.
Yeah, it was pretty hot too. I called downtown. I knew the chief of staff, and I called him and asked if I was ever going to make lieutenant, because I was very disappointed and hurt, because I think I'd given a whole lot of my life to the department. And he said, of course you are, but we have to look at these complaints. And I said, sir, they're nothing. They're worthless. And I know the 3 chiefs that promoted me said they were worthless. He goes, well, we have to look at them. But you're probably going to make lieutenant. Well, probably doesn't say much. So this went on for quite a while, and I'd call him like every month. And finally, I made an appointment to go talk to him in January of 2002. And in January 2002, he said, yeah, well, we're still looking at him. It wasn't a very good meeting. It was actually pretty... I'm not going to get into that. I'd rather not.
It's your story.
Discuss that part. But ultimately, in the complaints, I hadn't submitted Skelly's, which is my right to submit a Skelly on a complaint as to why I don't think this is fair or right or whatever. And I said, well, I didn't do any Skelly's because the lieutenant who wrote the LOTs, which is the letters of transmittals and complaints, had told me that if I did write Skelly's, he would do everything in his power to prevent me from ever getting promoted. Well, the chief of staff said, he can't do that. I said, I know, it's a violation of my rights. He goes, well, who was that? And I told him, well, sir, if you really want to know, I'm sure you can call West LA.
You can start to figure it out.
And he goes, I'm telling you, I want his name and I want it now. I said, okay, so I can't be disrespectful, and I gave him his name, and it just went on and on and on for months. And ultimately, I got sent to an ad hoc meeting in January of 2002. And it was to determine whether I was to be promoted or not. Was I promotable? Have I done something that should have removed me from ever being promoted again? And the ad hoc committee was 2 commanders. And it was Eric Lillo and Betty Kelopez. And they sat on my... 2 days later, Commander Lillo called me and said, hey, Nick, we sent your report on to the chief. You should hear something about it soon. So I said, okay. Well, that just lingered and lingered and lingered and lingered. And then Parks retired, and Martin Pomeroy became the interim chief. And unbeknownst to me, but I found out later, Betty Kelopez, Commander Kelopez, went to Chief Pomeroy and said, hey, Nick Barbara's getting a raw deal. And she explained to him, says he should be promoted and he's been getting a raw deal and you need to make it happen. And I know the conversation because I had somebody tell me who personally overheard the whole thing. And Pomeroy said, okay, I'll take a look at it. She goes, no, you'll take a look at it now because I'm telling you now, and you're going to set it aside and you'll never look at it because you'll forget. So I want you to look at it while I'm here, and you're going to look at it now. And I was on the next transfer, made lieutenant. And I spent then 11 years as a lieutenant at Wilshire.
Before retiring.
And then I retired.
So, eventful career.
Yeah, it was remarkable. It was hard to leave. I loved what I did.
He made an impact on a lot of people too. So 84, the world came to Los Angeles.
Yes, the Olympics.
What were you doing during the Olympics?
I was working Vice at the time, so I got assigned, my unit, we got assigned to 2 detectives out of Ad Vice downtown. And there was, I forget what it was called. It was, they had set up a phony business, and it was a money laundering business that they had set up. And so we got tasked to be their support. My whole Vice unit, we were there. We ran all the different things for them. We chased people down and tried to locate people for them. And what they did is they actually borrowed money, went to the city and borrowed $10,000 to start their business. And we started a money laundering business. And it was all aimed at prostitution and believe it or not, phone sex and prostitution, actual prostitution things, which phone sex was in the form of prostitution. And so I worked out for the entire Olympic period of time. And at the end of the thing, it was really interesting how that all worked out because they were laundering money for all these heads of these prostitution outfits. And we would do, people would have been shocked. We were doing $64,000 a week in phone sex alone that we were bringing in and laundering money. And what we did is we beat all the credit companies by lowering our rate. We said, we'll give you we want a 7% margin, and we'll give you a 7-day turnaround time, where all the credit companies were given a 10-day turnaround time. So we gave them a 3-day lead into so we were bringing in $64,000 a week on phone sex alone, not counting all the other prostitution money we were laundering. And at the end of that thing, it was really neat how it was set up, because at the end of the thing, they threw a huge party, brought all the ad vice people and other vice people, and they threw a huge party at the Hilton Airport Hotel. And it was to bring in all the heads of these prostitution outfits so they could make arrests. And then we did, as a result of that thing, there was a 26 location search warrant put together, and me and my team, we went and did one location. We did a search warrant on one location, and we did, like I said, 26, and 2 of the 26 were out-of-state locations they did search warrants on. And at that hotel, all those people were told to bring their best girls, because there was going to be businessmen. It was a business thing, and all the business guys were vice cops.
You had a story of, you had an AKA, and
yes,
and got a guy. Tell us about that one.
Well, at the search warrant location I went to, when you work vice, we get false information. Well, what is it? It's phony ID,
fake driver's licenses.
Fake, yeah, it's all fake stuff, so that we don't have to reveal our true person. So I had my fake ID, and when we were doing the search warrant, there was a madam that we were doing her apartment. She lived in an apartment. We were doing a search on her apartment, and we couldn't find anything on her business stuff. And we're just going, man, we know you've got something here. We know it's all over you. And ultimately we found it was under the couch, and it was stuff from the back and under the lining that's under couches. We found her books. And so we started flipping through there, and there was my ID from my false ID in her books. And she goes, oh, I don't know whose that is. I bought that couch, from somebody. And I said, well, do you know who this guy is? She goes, oh, yeah, I know him. I know him. I said, so this is part of your business? And then she caught herself when she said, yeah, I know, because she thought I was trying to prove that she didn't. These were all fake names and stuff. And then she goes, yeah, I do know him. We've done some business together. And I said, oh, okay. I said, do you know who that is? She goes, yes, I do. I said, that's me. And I showed her my false ID. I said, so I've never met you before, so we're going to seize your books, and we're going to seize you. And so we ended, I think they booked a whole bunch of madams and, heads of prostitution rings. It was really a great deal. It was a lot of fun. I missed the fun of the Olympics, but we got to do some things at the Olympic stuff. It was pretty cool. The last day was the best part of that, though, because when we went to close down the office, we had an office out in the valley, right on Ventura Boulevard. And we go there, and the 2 detectives, we had a phone there, and there was an answer machine. So we were all going there just to listen to what phone calls came in. And so he hits the one, and it's some guy. And it makes a long story short, it was an attorney. Turns out he's an attorney. He's calling up saying, hey, listen, my name is so-and-so, and I found this charge for $350, $400 on my credit card, and I've never been in Los Angeles. So the lead guy goes, did you ever charge anything somewhere else where, maybe it was headquartered in Los Angeles? He goes, no. He says, no. He goes, I've never bought artwork. I don't even know what your company does. And I said, well, okay. So make a long story short, the detective says, well, maybe your wife charged something that you don't know about. So we're going to need her name, and we want to talk to her. He goes, I'll take care of it. I'll pay for this. Don't worry about it. And hung up. It was for prostitution.
Sure.
And when he said, we need to talk to your wife, the guy goes, done.
Pope came next.
The Pope. I got assigned to the Pope. I know you were there too, but I got assigned to Western Avenue, just north of the 10 freeway. And we had the non-Catholic side of the street, which was the east side. All the east side were the non-Catholic side. On the west side of the street, across the street from us, were a Catholic side. And of the whole thing, where I was, they got in a big fight. It was a big Donnybrook kind of a thing. And it's like, the Pope went by, and after the Pope went by, then this big Donnybrook breaks out because the non-Catholics were bad-mouthing the Catholics across the street, and it was like we had to break the whole thing up. It was pretty funny when you look at it, and it was, I think the whole thing was a huge ordeal, huge. I mean, a tremendous amount of deployment for that.
Then the next big deployment was the riots. Where were you when the Rodney King riots?
I was at West LA, and what did I have? I think I still had my SPU unit at the time, and we worked like mid PMs. We worked from 6 at night till 3 in the morning, and that's pretty much what we did during that time, that riot. But it was, everybody thought it was, and I think a lot of people in the city thought it would be localized, and it proved not to be true because that riot spread throughout the entire city, this side of the hill and out in the valley. So it was a lot more widespread than they had really thought about. So periodically we'd get some rioters that would hit some of the businesses on La Cienega and come into West LA, and there was fires going all over the place. So, matter of fact, one night I captured like 16 burglars at 2 different locations. I got them, but then I asked for backups and stuff, and we got these guys. It was pretty funny, and some of the stores, it was amazing. Used to be a Circuit City, that was ours. Only things that were left were the nails that were holding the carpet down. I mean, they stripped that place down to almost to the studs. And then the amnesty hit, and that was the funniest thing because we could drive down the alleys. We had one small portion that was kind of a problem area in West LA. And you could drive down the alleys, and there were all these TV boxes and out for the trash. And what they ultimately did, they door knocked those people and said, if you have a new TV and if it happened to have come from Circuit City, you will not be charged if you want to return it. And so there were some people that actually surrendered their TVs because they knew they were stolen. It was really interesting that happened, but it was really easy to see them because you go down the alley, there's a brand new TV and a TV box and an old TV.
Then the DNC was your next big event. That was the Democratic National Convention was held in Los Angeles.
Yes, in 2000. And I'll tell you, it was quite an ordeal because I got selected as being a squad leader, a mobile squad leader and stuff like that. And we trained for 18 months before that convention of how we would handle things because, it was really bizarre because we had a lieutenant in charge of the whole thing, and I was one of the sergeants in there. 22 black and whites. And we would go on a training day, and we'd go to different parts of the city, code 3 from here to there and somewhere else all over the city. Can you imagine 22 black and white cars going code 3 down the street, which is lights and siren for those people that don't know that? But that's what it looked like. It looked like a black and white snake just moving down the street. And it got pretty ugly because the first night of the convention is when Rage Against the Machine was the band, and they were, I forget what genre they were, but they weren't they were kind of a very negative band.
Very anti-police in some of their stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
And as a result, for lack of a better way to put it, it was riotous. Now, it was, they called it civil disorder. They wanted to change the name. Riot sounds too ugly, but it was a riot. And ultimately, we ended up being brought in. And so our job was to move the crowds. And so I told my squads, I said, hey, here's what we're going to do. We're going to run at that crowd. And when we get close to them, I want you all to just start yelling loud. I don't care what you say, just move, 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 or whatever. And once we get them running, because me and my whole squad, we trained for that. because we know if we're going to move. And I said, everybody better be in shape because we're going to be doing a lot of work. So my whole point was if I could get the crowd moving once we're running at them, I'll get the crowd running. They're not going to be able to fight. They're going to get tired pretty quick. And so we pushed them. And then there was K-rails set up for borders and stuff like that. And we came to a K-rail, and my guys, we were jumping over K-rail, and I jumped over one, and I went up, over, and down, and the streets crowned. And so when I landed my left ankle, I rolled it and broke my left ankle. And I knew I broke it. I heard it snap. Fortunately, I was wearing boots, so I just cinched them up a little tighter, and for the next 2 hours, we moved crowds and chased people, and I did my job till we got to go back to the staging area. And then somebody snitched me off to the lieutenant.
Sergeant broke his ankle.
Yeah.
Pretty stellar career. A lot of cool things.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I mean, the heartaches that came along the way were losing a few friends. Phil Riley was when I was working in Venice. Phil was killed in the first 9 months I was there, and I knew Phil real well. And then Jimmy Choquette, when I was working 77th as a sergeant, Jimmy and I were 3+1s when I was at Venice, and he was at West LA as a 3+1, and we were the neighboring cars. So Jimmy and I became good friends for a long time, and we were good friends when I was a sergeant in 77th. And when he was killed, that was hard. It was hard because he was going through a very ugly relationship with his wife that was heading towards divorce, and I think they ultimately did get divorced, but I don't think it was finished absolutely when he was killed. And she didn't want anything to do with the department. She didn't want anything done for him, which was a very hard thing for all of us. And I can share it here now because nobody can penalize me, but we were told there was to be no escorts to the cemetery and all other stuff, couldn't do me and some of my guys, we got together and went in early and washed up some black and whites, and we went out to the mortuary out in the valley and escorted them to the cemetery. We stopped the guy in the hearse and we said, hey,
here's the deal.
Here's how it works. And he goes, oh, okay. And then we stopped just prior to the entrance to Rose Hills. And I got out and I went up to the guy at the hearse. I said, you're going to drive into the cemetery, and if they ask you, you never saw us. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, I mean, you never saw us. Oh, okay.
Got it.
So that was hard. Really hard, and those of us that were really close to Jimmy, we stuck around afterwards, and we did some things that somebody may not know that we will always hold in our hearts that we know, and I'm not going to share it here either.
That's fine. And Ed Kislow.
Yeah, I was the first sergeant there that night, and I was there before he got transported.
Yeah,
and that was hard.
Yeah,
because he was really a nice, easygoing guy, and he was helping a neighbor out, and got out and got shot by her. I think it was her ex-husband. And as soon as I got there, I knew he wasn't going to make it. He got hit in the neck, and I just said,
yeah.
So then it happened in Pacific, which was just right off the border, West LA. So I got there first. When the Pacific sergeant got there, I said, can you take this over? I want to go to the hospital. So I went to the hospital, and me and a couple of guys, we went to the hospital, which was Brotman. I don't know if it's changed its name again or not, but we went there, and the doctor...
And that's only about 6 blocks from his house.
Yes. And so we went there, and the doctor said, he's not going to make it. We were pretty convinced, because when we got there, he was opened up, and they had his lungs were laying out. And so he said, but I'm not going to call it. I'm going to let you guys go and say your goodbyes.
Good stuff.
Yeah, it was.
So all in all, a good career. More good days than bad.
Yes. And a lot of things that are really rewarding are memories of mine of those days and the things that we got to do and the people we got to serve and the people that were really good to us.
Right.
Let me share something real quick that's funny because it's like one night I'd gone to dinner when the riots were going on, and there's a restaurant I used to go to once a week up the bicycle shop cafe that used to be up on Wilshire. I used to go there once a week. I knew the owner real well, and I'd go there once a week.
After 19 years to go into his restaurant, I would think you might.
Yeah. Matter of fact, he and I played racquetball together. So we were good friends. And I was there, and as I was coming out that one night during the riot time, there was a guy in front of me who came out, and I came out, and he saw me, and he goes, hey, thanks for all what you guys do and stuff like that, and hey, I just live right up the street, and, if you guys ever need a cup of coffee, come on up to my house. I'll put on a pot of coffee for you. I said, we work graveyards kind of a thing. And he goes, oh, that's okay. I'd love to have you guys up there. Well, I looked at it, and I know the guy's seen me, I don't know how many times, the same guy. I knew him. I knew who he was. I'd seen him enough there. This is the only time he ever talked to me. And I know why he wanted to talk to me. That's added protection to him and his family. Have us there for free for a cup of coffee. He was getting us for nothing, kind of a deal. And I said, well, we know where you live. If you have a problem, call us. We'll come. But it was interesting just to see how some people reacted. I had a lot of people. Let me give you a quick story that was really funny. When I was assigned to Harbor, some of the guys on Morning Watch are really, the older guys, they were really good. There was a guy named Johnson, I forget his first name now, but a really nice guy. We used to do mock pursuits. And what he'd do is he'd go out and said, okay, we're going to do some mock pursuits. You're going to be the fox and we're going to be the
rabbit.
The rabbit, right? And so the whole deal was, so my partner said to me, hey, kid, can you drive pretty good? I said, yeah, I drive pretty good. He goes, okay, you're driving. And what we do is mock pursuits. And it's like they get so many seconds head start, and then we'd have to chase them. We'd go around, chase them. And if they lose you, you lose. And then you would swap off. So once you do them, then you switch, and now you're the rabbit and they're the fox. And my partner said, if you don't lose him, you're buying breakfast for everybody, because that was the whole deal. We would do these things, and we'd buy breakfast, and the losers would pay for breakfast. But it was really funny. So we were doing that one night, and we went to down by 22nd Street Landing. There was a coffee shop down there. So we went there, and we came in there, and some lady came up to our table and just started ranting and raving at us, calling us all kinds of names and saying, you guys are horrible, this, that thing. You guys are driving around like crazy people. That's really wrong, and blah, 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 blah. Our waitress came over and said, lady, you're not welcome here. Get out and leave my officers alone. She goes, they're risking their life for you, and you're talking to them like that? She goes, get out of my restaurant. And she actually literally escorted the lady out. So that was kind of it was a nice feeling. Even very early in my career, it was a nice feeling just to see how some people really cared.
Yeah, they do. They care. They care a lot about us. When you were talking about Ed, you got a little emotional, which all of a sudden spurred for me. You were one of the founders, one of the first people that put together LAPD's peer support program, as I recall.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
There were several of us that got together. There was a sergeant from Northeast. There was me. There was a few other guys. And then Father Mike. We all got together, and what we looked at is actually who really had a program like that was Baltimore Police Department. And we all looked at it, and we looked at their program, and we can do better than that. And that's what we did. We said, we can do better than that. And so when we put it together, the whole point was we're probably better suited to deal with officers going through troubles because we know we've been there too. And so we put it together, and what we asked for and we received, we said, we want exclusive access, and we don't want to have to reveal anything other than misconduct or something, that criminal activity. And they granted that. They said, okay, you have immunity from that, and we can't use that against you. And then, so we got the whole program together, and then there was people set all over the station and different stations, and they outlined it to different issues, financial, marital, whatever, death, all that stuff. And so there's a whole list of people that ultimately got put on it. And as a peer counselor, if I got a call from somebody, I could go to the watch commander and say, hey, I've got a peer counseling call, I got to go. And they were not allowed to stop you. They had to let you go. And there was a couple times I had to be a little tougher because I'd go and say, hey, I got a call, I got to go. And they said, no, we're short. I said, the department's given me authority to do this. I can go. I got to go. This is more important than a lot of things you realize. Well, what is it? I can't tell you what it is. I tell the lieutenant, I can't tell you what it is. And you go, well, I have to know. I said, no, you don't have to know. And the department's given us the authority to say, no, we don't have to tell you. I don't have to give you a name, and I don't have to tell you what the issue is. And that was just so that it could keep the door open for us. If we didn't have that, who'd call us?
Right.
So that was really neat to be able to put that together and to see it work.
And that's one of those ones that we don't think about, we don't talk about, but I have to believe, in fact, I know because I was a peer counselor too, those are lives that were saved.
Yes.
They're alive. You saved lives, police officers' lives.
Yeah.
Like, it's not the heroic stuff of the gunfight. It's much more subtle, much more subdued.
And sometimes much more severe.
Yeah.
Because you're talking about people who are on the brink sometimes. And I'm talking about brink like talking suicide. And I've had a few guys that I dealt with that actually did commit suicide. And that was always hard because there was a guy that when I was a sergeant at West LA, one of the guys I was counseling, he ended up, it was horrible. He ended up, he and his wife were separated and she had a new boyfriend. He was Hispanic, the boyfriend was black. And he ended up one night going to their house, kicked the door in, went in and shot and killed them both. Shot her 22 times. Broke every bone in her body. And it was a really horrible thing. And I'd had a lot of time invested, as did some other guys. We all spent a lot of time with him trying to work him through the problem. And we thought we had him pretty close to getting over the hump. And then that happened. And it was like, and one of the worst things I think that happened out of that deal was, and I discussed it because we were at roll call, and I won't mention names, but the captain at the time came in and called him an Adam Henry. I don't want to say that on here, but called him a name that I thought was inappropriate. And that name plus the fact he was a murderer. And it was hard for us to take because, we worked together. Right. And we all knew what he did. But it's like you don't come to roll call and tell all the other cops, this guy is a murdering blankety blank. Because it really hurt that captain. Everybody in that roll call room looked at him like, whoa, not very sensitive to the issue. And that's how it went across. It came across as that captain wasn't really sensitive to the whole issue, that there was a lot of work put into this guy trying to get him over the hump, and he just didn't make it.
Yeah. That's unfortunate. But again, there's, like I said, I will wager you saved a lot more lives than you'll even know about.
I hope so.
So it was a good thing. So. Anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah, I'll just share something really quick that a lot of people may know or may not know. But, early in my career, like about 3.5 years of my career, I became a born-again Christian and gave my life to Jesus Christ. And as a result, I lean on that every day. I mean, you can call me a Bible reader. I read my Bible every single morning. Matter of fact, I read it this morning before I came, and I read my Bible every single day, and I try and live my life the right way, and I try to be the person that God wants me to be to other people, and that's even to set myself aside for others. So that was a big turning point in my life, and it's been great. I'm thankful that I know where I'm going. So that's about all.
Okay.
But I'm thankful because there's a lot of guys that are in that same boat, and I know.
Yeah. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your career. Thank you for, you've impacted my career.
We had a good
for the
time.
better.
No, you did well. I speak highly of you, and I know you know that.
Well, I know you drink a lot there too. No, I'm kidding. Just want to say thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing, and thanks for working with us, and thanks for all you did for all the police officers that you worked with and around.
They meant a lot to me. They still do.